Hello and welcome to This Complex Life. Today I am talking with Jani and we are talking about continuing on the theme of relationships and all things couples therapy and intimate relationships, all that stuff. And this one has a little bit of a different flavour to some of the previous episodes, so I'm really excited to share this with you. Welcome to the podcast, Jani.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here today. Thank you, Marie.
So we met at a conference and I really loved what you were talking about. It was sort of a panel looking at sort of trans mental health and relationships. So you seem to have a real interest in working with a particular population or a particular group. Can you tell me a little bit about that, I guess, niche or area of specialty?
Sure. Yeah.
How did you find yourself there?
Okay, so a long time ago, I started working with transgender people because when I was a social work student, I'm an accredited mental health social worker. As a social work student, I knew some transgender people and I ended up doing some work for an agency and they were part of the demographic. So I became interested at that point because I thought it was an interesting area of life. And I've never been a judgmental person who kind of thought anything about how things have to be some way. So then as a therapist, having been working in therapy a long, long time, we had various couples come along and present to us. And I had individual clients who were transgender. I was actually originally asked if I would write a letter for somebody who wanted to have some hormone replacement. And so I didn't really know very much about it. So I sought some information and then I kind of uncovered this huge volume of information that, probably isn't available to everybody about, what it's like to live that life where, you need to go and get some medical intervention to help you to live an authentic life. And then we started to attract couples. Now, I work with my husband and we do couples therapy, and it's based on our training in Gottman therapy. And Gottman therapy is a therapy that's out of the US originally, but it's been going for a very, very long time. And so basically, I know my why, and my why is really significant to this. And so that was a part of why I decided, okay, this is a place where I can make things better. And so what will I do with that? I hope that answers your question, Marie.
Yeah, it sounds like you fell into it and then it evolved.
Absolutely. And I decided I wanted to fall into it for a whole host of personal and professional reasons. It's an area where not a lot of people work with couples who are gender diverse. And it's a much needed service to offer relationship therapy for those people. But also I have members of my family that I'm close to who are transgender. And that made a difference to me because it made me realize that, people need to be who they are.
Yeah. I work a lot with young people who are trans or transitioning, and sometimes we do a lot of family work and sometimes it's their own one-on-one support. And I do have several couples as well. And I guess I use the word queer because I think that's it captures a lot of the relationship dynamics.
Good universal term.
When you think about queer relationships, what's a myth that you see or you hear, whether it's in pop culture, in TV shows, at a dinner party? What's something that you might hear someone say that just drives you up the wall? What do people get wrong? And, I'm talking about this as someone who's in a cisgendered heterosexual relationship, so I can only offer a perspective and it's not one of lived experience, but there are some things that I hear people say and I just think, oh my goodness, that is just so bad or so incorrect or completely limiting. What are some things that you hear that kind of make you think, oh my goodness?
That you can't maintain a relationship with someone that you committed to, and you might have committed as a same-sex relationship or you might have committed as a cisgender relationship, and that then the person who is a transgender or non-binary person, a queer person, comes out more fully. It might have been that they'd mentioned it before, but it wasn't as prevalent as it's now become. And that's because lots of people experience gender dysphoria, which means that they don't feel at all like they're in the right body, and they need to take steps to feel better about themselves. And it's really important that they do, because one of the highest rates of suicide is people who have this gender dysphoria in a very severe form and are not accepted by people. So what drives me crazy is the idea that once that happens, that you've had this relationship, there was a gay relationship or you've had a cisgender relationship, that if that changes, if that perception from the people outside that relationship changes, the relationship can't continue to exist. And I've been told a whole host of fascinating but quite misdirected pieces of information about that. Like recently somebody said to me, oh, I've heard that, okay, no, those couples don't break up straight away, but 3 or 4 years later they break up. That's not based on any fact at all. That is such misrepresentation of the truth.
And that's interesting because, if you tracked a lot of couples, there would be some that just break up anyway. But what I'm hearing you saying is, and I've worked with people
that's
where
not the cause, yeah.
Yeah. And we can't underestimate how hard it is and how much pressure it can put on a relationship to have such a significant change, to maybe be undergoing medical intervention, to have ruptures potentially with family, just to be part of a smaller part of the population that is stigmatized, becomes a political issue. Like, that really is actually very, very difficult. So what makes it harder for couples navigating that?
I think any minority group is going to have difficulty because the mainstream has many people who want people to be the same as them. So I think all minorities can have difficulty. So queer couples can have difficulties because they're minorities. However, I think that acceptance and perceived acceptance is incredibly important for people. And having to announce things about your relationship to other people is a big ask. I mean, people don't come up to you. You said that you're a cisgender couple, right? You're in a cisgender couple's relationship. Is that right? Yeah. People don't come up to you and ask you questions about that. They don't make assumptions about it. They don't ask you impertinent questions about it. How do you feel about the fact that your partner identifies as a man? How do you feel about that, Marie?
Oh. Yeah.
That must be difficult for you sometimes, is it?
It can be.
But you see, it's impertinent. It's none of our business what happens in people's relationships. And so, okay, well, so you're in a relationship with a man, so you must be heterosexual.
Which I guess for some people that's the implication, and for others it might not be.
Well, that's right. But people don't go around saying, excuse me, Marie, are you bi or are you heterosexual? You're in a relationship with a man. So, which are you? Who are you? Well, nobody says that. Whereas for people who are in queer relationships, there are a whole lot of assumptions about, who is this person? How are they in this relationship? What's happening with it? Like we have seen couples where the parents of the person who is not coming out as transgender has then said, are you okay? And they might have known this person for a long time. I'm thinking of cases where they've known them for a decade or decades, and they've always loved and accepted that person who's now come out as transgender. And all of a sudden they're saying, oh yeah, but I can't support a transgender relationship. But hang on a minute, you've accepted this person for a decade or decades. How come you can't accept them now? What's the difference in who they are to who they were before? I find that quite hard to fathom. And I think that there are probably lots of therapists who see lots of couples and they see lots of different dynamics in couples therapy. And so they might also struggle with fathoming that. But I think in the general public, there might be a lot of misconception about what that actually looks like, what it's actually like to be in that situation, and that the outside perceptions are probably more of an issue for some people than for others.
So how can folk who are perhaps experiencing this, couples therapy is stigmatized in some groups anyway, and there's a lot of beliefs around it being that's when an absolute crisis, you go when it's like the absolute end, or that person's going to tell me all the ways that I'm getting it wrong. So let's say someone doesn't have that and they're like, okay, so we're exploring maybe our gender, our sexuality, even opening up the relationship if that's something. What can they look for in a therapist? Like finding a qualified, experienced couples therapist can be tricky anyway. What should they look for around inclusivity or experience or comfort with their presenting, with their identity, with their presenting issue, with their concerns, with their challenges? What are your thoughts on that? Like, where can they go? How do they find someone that's a good fit? Do they feel safe?
I think that that's got an overlap with lots of other looking for therapists because, what we all need in any therapist or supervisor that we have is a feeling that, okay, this person gets me. We work as a couple with couples, and I think that that helps because although we have a lot of similarities and we think a lot alike, we're quite different people. And I think that, the perception of working as a couple with couples, some people don't want to do that. They think that's really hard to have to deal with two people, whereas for other people, that's a really big plus. And I must say, if I was looking for a couples therapist, I would actually prefer to see a couple because I think the dynamic is easier for 4 people than, 3 people. But that's my personal preference. I do think that Gottman therapy is a fabulous therapy, and I think it's incredibly effective. And I see the results. We have a really high rate of people achieving what they came into therapy to achieve. And I say that rather than that they stayed together or that they broke up, because things can change during therapy. I don't think Gottman is the only therapy that's highly effective. I think there are other couples therapies that are effective, but I think that's another thing to look for if you're looking for a couples therapist. What are their qualifications in a therapy? Is there a particular style of therapy that they use? There would be people who would want someone with a particular belief system, or there'd be people who'd want someone who didn't have a particular belief system. There would be people who would want a very skills-based approach, and that's what Gottman therapy is. It's learning skills. And I suppose the aim, and this is my why, is healthy relationships are really important relationships. In this day and age where we see so many dreadful outcomes of unhealthy relationships, we need to be promoting healthy relationships. So you need a therapist that's going to be front and center of their approach. I hope that helps. I hope that's enough.
Yeah, so it might be some Googling, some research, but even asking around, because I know a lot of really great therapists who are terrible at marketing and really hard to find. So maybe even asking for recommendations and being okay to have a session as a taster, as a meet and greet. Yes, you will have to pay, and that's okay. Some might do a 10, 15-minute consult, but you might need a bit longer. But for something that's so personal and vulnerable and private, finding the right fit. And look, and I try to explain it to people that you want to be comfortable with the relationship, but the content's not always going to be comfortable. So it's like finding, the right coach or trainer. They will push you in a physical sense that it hurts because you don't get better at running without pushing yourself, or you don't lift heavier things without lifting heavy things, and that hurts. But you should have some trust in your dynamic with them, trust their technique, and be able to say, that didn't work for me. Can we try something else? So you're finding this balance of some things have to be uncomfortable to do the work, but you want the relationship to feel comfortable enough.
Mm. And I think that comes back to a really fundamental part of all of this, is that when you go to therapy, one of the realities is change. Some people find change really difficult. It's the hardest thing for them to think, okay, I've already always done this way, and now I'm going to have to do it this way. This is a very different way to operate. So for some people, that's, kicking and screaming to get there. And for other people, it's a really easy thing to say, okay, I don't like how it is, and I do want to change because I don't want to keep living this way. And so I think that that's another thing to think about, how are you carried along with this change? Are the people that are carrying you along supporting the fact that change might be very hard for you and that there might be really big changes that you have to make? And going back to, gender diverse relationships, queer relationships, it might be that there's been a lot of big adjustments to change. And so how does your therapist support you through that? How do they guide you? What do they say about it? And, do they talk the language that you get?
I think the change piece is really important. And when I've worked with couples where one person has come out as trans, we're really trying to find this balance of they might have known for years or decades. And for their partner, this is new information. And it's change, and it changes their sexual orientation sometimes, and it changes their identity, and they might be wholeheartedly supportive and still need to catch up. And we're finding this balance of grieving maybe what things looked like or what they were, or even just adjusting to something so different doesn't mean they're not on board and not supportive, and finding this balance of both people need a certain type of support and they have different relationship challenges on top of all the other stuff that we have, work pressures, family pressures, maybe parenting, having aged parents, work pressures, financial pressures, whatever. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And then there's this as well that can be so freeing for someone, and they could be really excited and be really scared. And there's so many things happening at once. How do you help couples navigate that?
That's an interesting question, because I think that all couples have to navigate that. I don't think that you can live with somebody for a long period of time and not navigate big changes. If you think about a couple who might meet in their 20s and they might stay together until they pass from this life, there's quite a few changes that happen. Things happen in your career. They happen whether you have studied or you're going to study. Are you going to have children? Can you have children? How are you going to have children? How many children are you going to have? Are you going to have to get a say in that? Being a grandmother of twins, I know that, sometimes things happen. And I think there's constant change. Lots and lots and lots of couples come to us when one partner or two are going through perimenopause and menopause. It's a common time of big changes. So I think that what I say to the people who are going through the change of, a gender orientation or a gender identity is, this person is your family. You have a lot connected there. What are the parts of this that are causing difficulty with the connection? What would you like to do about those things? What are the things about that are a bit scary? How have you negotiated those before? So sexuality might be a little bit different, but let's face it, in a long-term relationship, sexuality is a little bit different. I mean, it doesn't stay the same through a long period of time together. And the sexuality that you might want in your 20s and 30s might be very different to what you want in your 40s or 50s. The sexuality that you want in your well, for women in your mid-30s might be very different to the sexuality you want in your mid-80s. So, I think you've got to adapt to change all the time. And thinking about queer relationships, there isn't in some ways as much difference in how you negotiate changes as in non-queer relationships, cisgender relationships. There's more things in common than there are different. And that's another myth about transgender or queer relationships, is that they're so vastly different. They're not really. A lot of the things are the same. Some of the things that are not the same are how other people perceive you and how you are accepted or not accepted, or how in other parts of society, one is seen or not seen, or able to be seen or not seen. We're in a political minefield at the moment in terms of transgender rights and the safety of people. So that could be a big part. That could be a change that's very important and significant. But generally speaking, the majority of queer relationships have the same kinds of issues as other people.
I think that was a really good point of the biggest difference or the biggest challenge. And I only see this side of it for the couples and families I work with, is how other people respond. And so even within a family, they might wholeheartedly accept their loved one, and then it's navigating comments from insensitive bystanders, or, the Christmas period tends to be one where there are maybe more social events or family gatherings, and navigating how to, and I think this is a really good stuff for couples therapy to be able to talk about, is how can I support you in those times? Do you want me to correct someone or step up and protect you or challenge them, or do we let it go by? And having maybe ongoing conversations around, how do we keep us safe? How do I keep you safe, psychologically safe, emotionally safe? And I think that's a really big thing, and location plays a really big part of that. Where you are, your community can dramatically change the impact of some of those things.
Absolutely. That's totally how it is for us working with couples too, that, when there's a time where there's going to be a collection of people, and, we all know, we're therapists, we know the only people you can control are, here. So you can't control what somebody else is going to, think or say or do. And so you've got to work out, well, how are we going to negotiate this and come to agreements? And it might be that you sometimes don't go to some things because there are going to be people there who are going to treat you with disrespect. But, quite frankly, should any of us go to anything where we're going to be treated with disrespect? If somebody's going to be horrible to you or your children, do you want to expose your family to that? If there's somebody who's, inappropriate towards you, do you want to be around that person, right? And so, I think that as a partner of somebody, it's important that you think about, this person is my person. They're the most important person in this relationship apart from myself. So how am I going to make sure that I protect them? So what agreements are we going to come to about that? Are we going to go to this thing where there's these people who say some really demeaning things? Or are we going to say, okay, well, we're not doing that because we're not going to expose ourselves to that because we don't have to? And I think too, and I've often suggested this to couples, if you want to have some ability to manage something, it might be that you change where you go. So instead of having people at your house, you might go to somewhere else to do it so you can get away. Or it might be that you do it at your house because you think people will behave better when they're in your space. So I think those kind of simple dynamics are things to negotiate too. Will we feel safer in our own space, or will we feel safer somewhere else where we can leave?
Yeah, I think they're really good conversations to have. And when we look at Gottman therapy in particular, and I use Gottman and I love some EFT tools and we bring in bits and pieces. The skill that we're trying to build and equip people with is how to have the conversation. The content is interchangeable. The content could easily be changed from we're having difficulty because we're a mixed race couple or mixed culture couple or queer couple or, I don't know, meat eater vegan or, dog and cat lover couple difference. Like the difference could be a number of things, and some are significant differences that cause a lot of challenge. But how we have those conversations is the skill that we're trying to equip people with.
Yes.
For someone listening, and I had this come up recently and it kind of caught me not off guard, but I was working with a young person, or not young person, they're not young anymore. They're a trans person who has a really supportive partner, and their concept of themselves had kind of evolved and changed, and they didn't know how to rediscuss that, how to bring up with their partner what would have felt like seemingly out of nowhere. They're thinking about the next step of hormonal medical intervention, or, they're questioning something around their identity. How can people maybe who are listening and like, we have really great conversations, we're really supportive, and I've had some things on my mind that aren't bad. They're not good. They're not bad necessarily. They're just thoughts. How do I bring that up? How do I just randomly say, hey, by the way, I've been thinking about XYZ. What are some DIY tips or tools that folks can try?
I think that getting some literature for your partner to read helps a lot. If your partner's not a reader, maybe you could get something, that's on Audible, or you get them to listen to a podcast, or you sort of find some other way to give them some information. And there is some real misinformation out there. So the sources that you want to use for the right information, the correct information, OzPath puts out information that's very accurate. There are therapists who work with transgender people and they're able to access information that's very accurate. But I think another thing to do is to say, look, I feel like I'm not in the right space. I'm not in the right space in a whole lot of ways, and part of that is how I feel about my body. And I just wonder if we could talk about that. It's really hard for me to talk about this, but can we just talk about that? And I think that Gottman therapy offers a lot of things about, how to, listen to understand rather than just listen to respond. So I think that, there are real skills there in learning to listen, to summarize, to validate. And so if as a partnership you don't have those skills, then those conversations are much harder to have. But making an assumption that, people are able to listen to understand and are willing to listen to understand, then I think a really good thing to say is, my body doesn't feel right and I need to go and see somebody about what kinds of things might be possible for me. These are the things I've been reading, and I mean, there's a lot out there about taking hormones. And so I've thought about the possibility of taking something or doing something different. How would you feel about going with me when I go and see this particular doctor? Now, this doctor is knowledgeable about this area that I'm talking about. Would you come with me? And letting the doctor know that your partner is coming and that your partner may or may not be 100% on board. But I think that lots of times when I've referred personally, or I've referred as a couple, people to go and do that, it's gone very well because the doctor's been able to give them like a medical explanation. And that's been very helpful, because for some people, when they hear that it's a medical thing, they feel better about it. It doesn't seem so much like just an idea that I had and I'm just going to go off and do this odd behavior. It's there's something that's medically not right and we can make it right. I don't know whether you've had that experience, but, I just find that's an easy way to kind of get out of it. It's some odd idea that you've just developed.
Various forms of that. I think I encourage people to talking about it. So a podcast episode, a movie, something might have brought that thought up in that moment, and then catching your partner, not at the, don't set them up to fail. Don't do it when you're lying in bed and it's 11:30 at night. And then you're like, oh, hey, by the way, and they might be pooped. So you're not going to get the reaction that you want from them. It might be in saying, look, can we have a chat at this time? Or there's a few things I want to nut out with you. So if you're saying talk to you about, that might be like, oh my God, it's something serious. So it could just be, there's a few things that have been on my mind I want to kind of sift through or nut out with you. So have that expectation for them of, it's just sort of like brainstorm or to download, and either ask when would be a good time, or say on the weekend, can we carve out some time, go for a walk? And I just want to kind of, I'm trying to digest all this stuff that I've been thinking about, and I really want to share it with you, and letting them kind of know that, because if they're thinking about work or kids or what's for dinner, who knows, any other combination of things, and you've got this really big, deep, burning thing to talk about, or awkward thing, or it feels really vulnerable, and you try it and they don't receive it in the way that you're hoping for, it can be really uncomfortable and you can feel really defeated and rejected.
And I think that you were absolutely right when you said that don't build it up to make it sound like it's a big deal. I can remember somebody telling me something, once about their sexual identity, and they told me, they didn't tell me that was what it was about. They told me, oh, I've got to talk to you. I've got to tell you something. It's really big. It might change our relationship. And then they proceeded to tell me. And then I said, so what's the thing that you think might change our relationship? And they said, oh, that's it. And I said, well, I think you'd still be the same person that I care about. So I think you'll still be the same person that I care about. So, yeah, it's not a really big thing for me. It's just another part of you. And, you're part of my family. I care about you deeply. You'll still be part of my family. I'll still care about you deeply. So the other thing is that the person making whatever disclosure it is needs to make sure that they've got some other parts around them that help them, either internal parts around them that help them, or parts to do with, community or friends or supports or relatives or whatever. I think it's really sad if people aren't already in a situation, in a relationship where they're used to having some D&Ms on a regular basis. The Gottmans talk about State of the Union meetings, and that's like for some people, we advocate that people talk for 5 minutes every single day to each other about their emotional place at that time. So how are you going today, right? But I think that a weekly get together to talk about, what's on your mind, what's big, what's going on, how are you coping, what do you want, what plans do you have, what would you like to do about, what date nights or date days or whatever should we have this next week, whose turn is it? I think that State of the Union stuff is really, really important. And for couples who already do that, then I think that's an excellent place to talk about gender identity. But if you're not doing that already, I think that's an excellent thing that every couple can do, is have a time where it's a safe space that you've already created, that you've said, okay, we're going to talk every week, once a week, on a particular time, we're going to have this talk.
Yeah. So it really comes back to what you were saying. Some of the challenges are the challenges that all relationships have. And you can't grow a garden that doesn't get water, or, you can't have the health and fitness that you want without investing in certain food, exercise, movement of some kind. Relationships take work, and conflict is inevitable. How you handle it is important. And if you've got a good solid foundation that forms that friendship, these other conversations will be easier to have. And so I think some of that is really important for people to remember, that those things take time and investment, and there's no shortcut to a good quality relationship.
Absolutely. There is no shortcut. And all of the things that we do in life that are really important for us take some time and some energy and some commitment and some trust. And so a long-term relationship that's working and that's healthy is going to take those things. So I think that that's absolutely essential, that people think about relationships as something that you have to have emotional investment in. And the Gottmans talk about an emotional bank account. And so, yeah, I mean, you put energy into those things and you get rewards.
So what's maybe as a parting, I guess, piece of advice or something people can do, how would you like to sort of wrap up this conversation? What's a takeaway for our listeners?
I think there's a couple of things that are really essential for healthy relationships. And one of those is that when you when you move a little bit away from your family of origin to have a romantic relationship, the romantic relationship is separate to the family of origin. And the romantic relationship, if it's a long-term relationship that's committed, and so we've got the pillars of commitment and trust, if it's going to be a serious long-term thing, then that is your family. And while the family around you should be supportive and nurturing and helping that relationship and being around for that relationship, if there's difficulty, then it has to not necessarily, and we're talking about healthy relationships, not unhealthy relationships. But if it's a healthy relationship, then that relationship has to be given a level of priority. So your family of origin has to be given a place, but your coupledom has to be given a different place. And that connection is something that you build upon, and love grows. And then lots and lots of things, lots of adaptations you can make. And there's nothing more certain than change.
I love that. Thanks so much, Jani.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. To keep the conversation going, head on over to Instagram or LinkedIn and follow me. If you'd like to keep updated with episodes and other interesting things happening in mental health, join my weekly This Complex Life newsletter, where I'll share tools, tips and insight. There's a link in the show notes. Got a question you want answered? Shoot me an email or a DM. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a rating and a review. It helps other people find the podcast.